It was 2017 when I first made the leap. I had just turned 28 and was stuck in a comfortable job that paid the bills but left me feeling suffocated. I was a mid-level marketing manager at a tech company in Silicon Valley, where I had spent the past 4 years climbing the corporate ladder. But one day, as I sat in a meeting listening to people argue over a product that I knew wouldn't work, I had a moment of clarity. This wasn't the life I wanted anymore. The dream of building something of my own had been gnawing at me for years, but I had always pushed it aside. Maybe later, I kept telling myself. But that afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave. I would bet on myself. I didn't have a grand business plan, no safety net, and only a vague idea of what I wanted to do. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. So, I handed in my resignation the next morning, leaving behind the security of a steady paycheck and a promising career. I spent the next few months in what I can only describe as a blur of uncertainty and excitement. The first couple of weeks were full of optimism. I had dreams of a multi-million-dollar business, inspired by stories of overnight success in the media. I began sketching out ideas for an online business, knowing that e-commerce was a growing industry. But every time I Googled how to start an online business, I was met with overwhelming information and confusion. I had no experience in web design, coding, or product sourcing. All I had was a deep frustration with my old job and the urge to create something of my own. It wasn't until a late night, in a fit of desperation, that I realized I had to start small. The idea that stuck with me was simple: create a brand that would solve a problem I had faced for years. I loved working out, but finding stylish, comfortable, and affordable gym apparel had always been a challenge. There were brands that catered to the high-end market, but they were far too expensive for someone like me. On the other end, the budget-friendly brands often felt cheap and uninspired. That's when the idea hit me. Why not create a fitness apparel brand that combined style, comfort, and affordability? I didn't have much to start with, just $1,000 that I had saved up from my corporate job. Most of that went into setting up a basic website, which I designed myself using a platform I'd never heard of before called Shopify. It was a steep learning curve, and I made every mistake in the book. Terrible product descriptions, poor images, and a confusing checkout process. But I kept pushing forward, learning from each mistake. The next challenge was sourcing products. I had no connections in the fashion industry, so I began cold emailing manufacturers from all over the world. After weeks of back and forth and countless rejections, I finally found a supplier who was willing to work with me on a small batch. The first samples came in, and I was excited. They weren't perfect, but they were good enough. I had no budget for expensive photo shoots, so I took pictures myself in my tiny apartment, using my smartphone and some basic lighting equipment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was all I had. I launched my website late one night, unsure of what to expect. The first sale didn't come for 2 weeks. It felt like a punch to the gut. I had poured everything into this project, and it was crickets. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe this wasn't meant to be. Maybe I should go back to a real job. But then, out of nowhere, the first order came in. I had a mix of excitement and panic. I had no idea what to do next. I packaged the order myself, sent it out, and prayed that the customer would be satisfied. A few weeks passed, and sales were slow, but steady. I was still working a side job as a freelancer to keep the bills paid, but I knew I couldn't give up. I kept refining the website, tweaking the product descriptions, and running small Facebook ads. The breakthrough came when I had an idea for a viral marketing campaign. I knew that social proof was everything, especially for a new brand. So, I reached out to a few fitness influencers, offering them free products in exchange for a review or shout-out. I didn't have much to offer, but they saw the potential in my brand and agreed. When their posts went live, the response was overwhelming. Orders started flooding in, and for the first time, I felt like I was on to something real. By the end of 2018, I had grossed $100,000 in sales. It wasn't life-changing, but it was a huge step forward. More importantly, it proved that my idea had legs. The next challenge was scaling. I reinvested every dollar I made back into the business. I upgraded my website, hired my first employee, and began designing new products. I also knew I had to get serious about branding. I worked with designers to create a logo and a marketing strategy that would resonate with my target audience. I spent months perfecting the messaging and targeting the right groups on social media. In 2019, things started to really take off. My revenue doubled, and by the end of the year, I had hit $500,000 in sales. But with success came new problems. Inventory management became a nightmare, and my small team struggled to keep up with the growing demand. I had to make tough decisions about outsourcing production, hiring more staff, and finding new ways to streamline operations. It was stressful, but it was also incredibly rewarding to see my brand gain recognition. Then came 2020. The pandemic hit, and the world seemed to stop. Retailers were shutting down, gyms were closing, and I was terrified. But instead of panicking, I pivoted. I launched a new line of loungewear, capitalizing on the fact that people were now spending more time at home. I also doubled down on e-commerce, offering faster shipping, virtual styling sessions, and increased engagement on social media. It was a gamble, but it paid off. 2020 ended up being my best year yet, and by the end of it, my business was doing over $3 million in sales. Today, I look back at that time with a sense of disbelief. I went from having no experience in fashion or e-commerce to running a multi-million-dollar brand with a team of 40 people. The road was never easy, and there were times when I doubted myself, but I never gave up. There were countless failures, but each one taught me a valuable lesson. The most important thing I learned is that success is not about having a perfect plan from the beginning. It's about adapting, learning, and being willing to fail forward. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous, and it's not for everyone. But for me, it's been the most rewarding journey of my life. If you have an idea and the drive to make it happen, I promise it's worth the risk. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I had always been the kid with big ideas. Growing up in a small town, I was surrounded by people who followed traditional paths. Work hard, save money, get a steady job, and live a modest life. But even as a kid, I couldn't quite wrap my head around the idea that this was all there was to life. I was always dreaming bigger, reading books about entrepreneurs, and secretly planning my future. Everyone around me just thought I was a daydreamer, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't meant to settle for mediocrity. At 18, I made the decision to leave my small town and move to the city to chase my dreams. My parents were supportive, though they didn't fully understand why I felt the need to leave. They encouraged me to get a real job and start building a stable life, but I had other plans. I wanted to start my own business. The thought of working for someone else my entire life seemed suffocating. I wanted to create something from scratch, something that would make a difference, something I could call my own. I started by reading everything I could get my hands on about entrepreneurship. I devoured books, articles, and blogs, and even took free online courses. But no matter how much I learned, I still felt unsure about how to actually start a business. I had no money to invest, no connections, and no experience in the industry I was interested in. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I began with a simple idea. I would launch an e-commerce store selling custom-designed t-shirts. I had always loved graphic design and thought it would be fun to create cool, quirky designs that people could wear. I spent weeks designing logos, slogans, and graphics, and finally, I set up a website using a free e-commerce platform. The store was live, and I was ready to make my first sale. Except, nothing happened. For months, I struggled to get any traction. I spent hours promoting the store on social media, writing blog posts, and running small ads, but my sales were non-existent. I was getting frustrated. I had invested all my time and energy into this idea, but it just wasn't working. I felt like I was sinking into an abyss of doubt, wondering if I was just wasting my time. But I wasn't ready to give up. I had come too far to quit now. I decided to reassess my approach. I realized that I had made a common mistake. I had launched a product without fully understanding the market. I didn't know what my potential customers actually wanted. I was just making things that I liked and hoped others would too. I had no solid strategy, no niche, and no clear understanding of how to stand out in a crowded market. I knew I had to make a change. So, I took a step back and started over. I started by listening to my audience. I engaged with people on social media, asked for feedback, and paid attention to the trends in the t-shirt market. I realized there was a growing demand for eco-friendly clothing, and that sparked an idea. What if I could create a line of sustainable, ethically made t-shirts with unique designs that would resonate with people who cared about the environment? With this new direction in mind, I revamped my business. I sourced materials from eco-friendly suppliers, rebranded the store, and began focusing my marketing efforts on promoting the sustainability aspect of my products. I reached out to influencers who were passionate about environmental causes and offered them free products in exchange for promotion. Slowly but surely, my efforts began to pay off. I made my first sale after relaunching the store, and it felt like a huge victory. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. The next few months were a roller coaster. I learned how to optimize my website, improve my product photography, and run more effective ads. I spent long hours refining my brand and figuring out what worked and what didn't. I faced setbacks and failures, but I never lost sight of my vision. By the time I was 22, my business had grown significantly. I was making enough money to support myself and had even hired a few part-time employees to help with customer service and fulfillment. I was no longer struggling to make ends meet. I had built something real, but I didn't stop there. I wanted to take my business to the next level. I knew that in order to scale, I had to think bigger. I started looking into expanding my product line, offering not just t-shirts, but also other sustainable clothing items like hoodies, leggings, and hats. I also began exploring international markets, reaching out to customers overseas who were interested in eco-friendly fashion. I even started a subscription box service where customers could receive new, exclusive designs every month. The business was growing at an exponential rate. We had our first six-figure year by the time I was 24, and by 25, I was on track to hit seven figures. I was able to quit my side jobs and focus entirely on my business. It was everything I had dreamed of, but it didn't come without its challenges. Scaling a business comes with its own set of problems: inventory issues, shipping delays, customer complaints, and the constant pressure to keep innovating. But I embraced it all. I had learned the hard way that failure was just part of the process, and I was determined to keep pushing forward. As my business continued to grow, I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. I didn't want to stop at just running a successful company. I wanted to use my platform to inspire others to follow their dreams. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, offering advice, and sharing my story. I created online courses and even started a YouTube channel where I documented my journey and shared the lessons I had learned along the way. Looking back on it now, I can't believe how far I've come. I've made mistakes, faced setbacks, and endured countless sleepless nights, but I've also learned so much. My business isn't just a source of income. It's a reflection of my passion and perseverance. It's a testament to the fact that with the right mindset, anything is possible. To anyone out there who's struggling, feeling like giving up, or wondering if they're cut out for entrepreneurship, I want to say this: don't quit. The road is long, and it's going to be tough. But if you keep going, if you stay focused, and if you're willing to adapt and learn, you can make your dreams a reality. Success isn't about getting it right the first time. It's about never giving up, even when it seems impossible. So, to anyone reading this who's still on the fence about chasing their dreams, take the leap. It might be scary, and you might fail a few times, but that's just part of the journey. And trust me, it will all be worth it in the end. It was 2017 when I decided to quit my stable job and dive into the world of entrepreneurship. I had been working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company for nearly 6 years. My role was comfortable, the pay was good, and I had a solid career trajectory ahead of me. But deep down, I knew that I wasn't living the life I was meant to. I had this constant urge to do something on my own, something that would challenge me and push me to my limits. The idea of being in charge of my own destiny, of making my own decisions, was irresistible. The first few months of my entrepreneurial journey were incredibly difficult. I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I began researching the startup world, attending networking events, and reading everything I could about business. My friends and family thought I was crazy for leaving a secure job, and I couldn't blame them. They didn't understand the passion I have for building something from scratch. After a couple of months of brainstorming, I decided to go into the digital marketing space. It seemed like a good fit because of my background in tech and project management. I didn't have much experience in marketing specifically, but I was a fast learner. The plan was simple: I would offer marketing services to small businesses that didn't have the budget to hire large agencies. I knew I could provide them with the same high-quality work at a fraction of the price. At first, things were slow, really slow. I didn't have any clients, no reputation, and no portfolio. I used my savings to pay for ads and set up a website. I also created social media profiles for the business and started posting content regularly. My strategy was to offer free consultations, hoping that if I could get my foot in the door, I could prove my value and eventually land paying clients. For the first 2 months, I heard crickets. My phone didn't ring. My emails went unanswered. Every morning, I'd wake up excited, hoping that today would be the day I'd get my first client. But each day, I was met with disappointment. I was living off my savings, and the pressure was starting to build. I didn't want to give up, but I was beginning to question if this was the right path for me. Then, one day, I received a message from a small local business. They had seen one of my social media posts and were interested in discussing their marketing strategy. I was ecstatic. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I scheduled a meeting with the business owner, and when the day came, I was prepared to make my pitch. I walked into the meeting, feeling confident but nervous at the same time. The owner was a middle-aged woman who ran a boutique clothing store. She explained her challenges with reaching new customers and growing her online presence. I listened carefully and offered a few ideas, all of which she seemed to like. We agreed to a deal, and I was officially in business. The work itself wasn't easy. The business owner didn't have much of a budget, so I had to be resourceful and come up with creative solutions to help her grow her brand. But over the course of the next few months, things started to turn around. Her sales increased, and word of mouth began to spread. I started getting more clients, and before I knew it, I had built a small but steady client base. Around the same time, I made another important decision. I was going to scale my business. I had learned that I couldn't do everything on my own, and if I wanted to grow, I needed a team. I hired a freelancer to help with content creation and another one for graphic design. Slowly, my team grew, and we started taking on bigger projects. I was finally beginning to see the fruits of my labor, but the road to success was still full of challenges. As my business expanded, so did the competition. There were new agencies popping up every day, many of them offering lower prices or fancier services. I started to feel the pressure of standing out in a crowded market. I couldn't afford to lower my prices, as that would hurt the quality of service I was providing. So, instead, I focused on what made me different, my experience in project management and tech. I offered a unique blend of strategy and execution that allowed my clients to see results faster. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were months when things were tight, and I had to make difficult decisions about where to invest my resources. But each time I faced a challenge, I learned something new. I learned how to manage cash flow, how to delegate tasks, and how to deal with difficult clients. There were days when I felt like giving up, but I kept reminding myself why I started in the first place. I wanted to build something that would make a difference, and I wasn't going to let fear or failure stop me. Fast forward to today, and I'm proud to say that my digital marketing agency is thriving. We've worked with some amazing clients, and I've been able to expand my team even further. We now offer a full range of services, from social media management to paid advertising to web development. We've built a reputation for delivering high-quality work and exceptional customer service. What started as a one-man operation in my small apartment has now grown into a successful business with a dedicated team of professionals. But even with all the success, I still face challenges. There are always new competitors entering the market, and technology is constantly changing. The landscape of digital marketing is never static, which means we always have to stay ahead of the curve. But I've learned to embrace the uncertainty and use it as an opportunity to innovate. If there's one thing I've learned from my entrepreneurial journey, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, persistence, and the willingness to fail and get back up again. There were plenty of moments when I doubted myself and questioned my decisions, but I kept pushing forward. And now, I can look back and be proud of what I've built. Starting a business is hard. It's full of ups and downs, and there will be times when you feel like giving up. But if you have the passion, the drive, and the resilience to keep going, you can turn your dreams into reality. If I can do it, anyone can. I may have started with nothing but a vision and a laptop, but today, I'm living the life I always dreamed of. And if you're reading this and thinking about taking the leap, I say go for it. You won't regret it. I was 23 years old when I made the decision to quit my comfortable office job to start my own business. At the time, I had a stable income, decent benefits, and the kind of life that most people would envy. But I had this burning desire to create something bigger than myself, something that would not only support my family, but also challenge me in ways I couldn't even imagine. I had no real plan, but I was determined to make it work. It all started one evening when I was scrolling through social media. There was a post from an old college friend, Mark, who had recently launched a tech startup. He was raving about how much money he was making, how flexible his schedule was, and how passionate he felt about the work he was doing. That post stuck with me. I had been working in marketing for a couple of years, helping brands promote their products and services, but I felt like I was just another cog in the wheel. I wasn't creating anything. I was just pushing other people's visions. I had always been fascinated by the world of e-commerce, and over the years, I had dabbled in a few online projects here and there. Nothing serious, just side hustles, reselling products on eBay, dropshipping, and even trying to sell my own handmade goods. But those ventures never went anywhere. They were just small, half-hearted attempts, and I was too afraid of failure to fully commit to them. But after seeing Mark's success, I felt something shift in me. I realized that the fear of failure was worse than failing itself. That night, I decided to take the plunge. I called my best friend, Ben, who had been a web developer for years, and asked him if he wanted to partner up. Ben had always been a solid guy, and while he didn't have any business experience, he was incredibly skilled with coding and web development. We talked for hours about ideas, potential products, and services. We threw around all kinds of crazy ideas. Some of them were terrible, others seemed promising. But the more we talked, the more we realized that there was a niche in the e-commerce space that wasn't being fully addressed. Eco-friendly products that were stylish, functional, and affordable. Ben and I weren't experts in sustainability, but we were passionate about the environment. We both grew up in households that valued the planet, and over time, we had become more aware of the negative impact that fast fashion and wasteful consumerism were having on the world. We figured that if we could create a brand that offered quality, eco-friendly alternatives to everyday products, we could not only build a successful business, but we could also contribute to a cause that mattered. The first few months were a blur of learning, experimenting, and failing. We built a website, sourced products from suppliers who claimed to offer sustainable goods, and started designing a brand identity. But right away, we ran into a major issue. Our suppliers were unreliable. Some of them sent us products that didn't meet our quality standards, and others took months to deliver. This was a massive problem, especially when we started getting customer complaints about delayed shipments and low-quality products. We had put so much energy into launching this business, and now it was unraveling in front of us. I remember one particularly stressful week when I was sitting at my desk, staring at my laptop, and wondering if it was all worth it. We had spent money on inventory, marketing, and a website, and here we were, getting terrible reviews. I didn't know how we were going to recover. Ben and I stayed up late trying to figure out a solution, and after a lot of trial and error, we decided to cut ties with our suppliers and try a different approach. We started reaching out to smaller, local manufacturers who could meet our eco-friendly standards and deliver high-quality products. At the same time, we revamped our website to focus on customer education. We wanted people to understand the importance of choosing sustainable products and why our brand was different from the countless others that claimed to be green. We even started a blog to discuss sustainability, eco-friendly lifestyles, and ways to reduce waste. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. Our new suppliers were more reliable, our products were getting better reviews, and we were starting to gain a small but loyal customer base. We put more money into marketing, using social media platforms to spread the word about our mission and values. People seemed to connect with our story, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We even partnered with a few influencers who shared our values and helped promote our products to a wider audience. Despite the progress we were making, there were still plenty of setbacks. Our advertising budget was limited, and we often struggled to break even on our sales. There were days when we felt like giving up, especially when we would receive a negative review or when the sales numbers would dip. But we kept pushing forward, believing that if we could just get the word out to the right people, we could make it. Then came the breakthrough moment. One of our Instagram posts caught the attention of a major eco-conscious lifestyle blogger. She wrote a glowing review of our brand, and suddenly, we were flooded with orders. Our website traffic spiked, our social media following grew exponentially, and we started receiving press coverage from other sustainable brands. It felt like we had finally hit the tipping point, and from that moment on, things started to snowball. We began hiring a small team to help with customer service, inventory management, and marketing. I focused more on the big picture strategy, while Ben handled the technical side of the business. Our brand was growing, and we were able to scale up our operations without losing the core values that had made us successful in the first place. Fast forward 3 years, and our company is now a thriving business with a team of over 20 people. We've expanded our product line to include everything from reusable kitchenware to eco-friendly clothing, and we've built partnerships with several well-known eco-conscious brands. We've also developed a network of loyal customers who believe in our mission, and we continue to focus on educating people about the importance of sustainability. Looking back, I still can't believe how far we've come. There were so many moments of doubt, frustration, and failure along the way, but I never gave up. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not a straight path. It's a winding road full of ups and downs, and the key is to keep moving forward, even when things seem impossible. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that passion, perseverance, and the willingness to fail are the most important ingredients for success. I could have stayed in my comfortable office job, but I would have missed out on the opportunity to build something that I truly care about. It hasn't been easy, but I wouldn't change a thing. So, to anyone out there who is thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start now, learn as you go, and never let fear hold you back. You never know what could happen if you just take the leap. I started my entrepreneurial journey in a small town where opportunity was sparse, and the idea of starting a business seemed more like a dream than a reality. I grew up in a working-class family, where both my parents worked full-time jobs to keep the lights on. Despite the hard work, there was always a sense that they were just getting by, never truly thriving. From an early age, I promised myself I wouldn't let my life follow the same path. But little did I know that the path to entrepreneurship would be much harder than I ever imagined. It all began when I was 21 and freshly out of college. I had a degree in business, but no real-world experience. I was full of energy and ideas, but I lacked the wisdom that comes only from facing failure head-on. Like many others, I dreamed of becoming a tech mogul or a startup founder, thinking that one day an idea would pop into my head and the rest would be history. But the truth is, that eureka moment never came. Instead, I found myself working at a small, dead-end marketing job at a local firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and after all, that's what everyone around me seemed to be doing. Working 9-to-5 jobs, living for the weekend, and making just enough money to get by. One day, while on a lunch break at a local cafe, I overheard a conversation between two guys talking about starting an online business. They were in the process of launching a platform to help small businesses set up e-commerce websites. I had no experience in tech, but I could tell from the conversation that they were passionate about the idea. Something about their determination struck a chord with me. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to be part of something like that. That night, I stayed up late reading everything I could about e-commerce, digital marketing, and website development. I wasn't exactly a tech genius, but I knew enough to understand that the digital world was the future. Within a few weeks, I decided to start my own online business, a store that would sell niche products that weren't available in local retail stores. The only problem? I had no money to invest. I had a few thousand saved up, but it was hardly enough to cover the costs of building a website, inventory, and running ads. So, I did what any resourceful, desperate young person would do. I maxed out my credit cards. The plan was to make it work, and if I failed, well, I'd deal with the consequences later. I spent the next few months working every single day after my 9-to-5 job, building my store from the ground up. I learned how to build a basic website, source products, and market them on social media. It wasn't easy, and I made a ton of mistakes, but there was one thing I had that I couldn't buy: determination. I knew that if I kept pushing, something would give. One day, after several months of late nights, I received my first order. It was a small, insignificant sale, but to me, it felt like winning the lottery. It was proof that all my hard work wasn't in vain. I still remember the moment I saw the order confirmation come through. My heart raced, and I immediately started doing a happy dance in my apartment. It was a turning point, a sign that I was onto something. From there, things slowly began to pick up. I made more sales, invested more in ads, and began to scale. But I quickly learned that success in business wasn't just about making a sale. It was about creating an experience for your customers. I focused on customer service, offering fast shipping and responsive support. I wanted every customer to feel like they were getting something special, not just a product. Fast forward 2 years, and my business was doing well enough to allow me to quit my day job. It wasn't easy. The first year of full-time entrepreneurship was a roller coaster. There were days when I thought I was going to lose everything. But those were the days that taught me the most about what it really takes to run a business. As the years went by, I kept scaling. I hired a small team, expanded my product range, and became more serious about automation and systemization. I started looking at my business as a machine that needed to run efficiently. But just when I thought I had everything figured out, the market changed. The e-commerce space became oversaturated, and competition skyrocketed. What had once been a profitable niche was now flooded with competitors offering the same products at lower prices. I could have panicked, but instead, I took a step back and reevaluated. I realized that my initial success had been built on a foundation of creativity and customer service, but those alone wouldn't help me survive long-term. I needed to adapt to the changing market. I spent months learning about new trends, consumer behavior, and digital marketing strategies. I overhauled my website, invested in SEO, and started leveraging influencer marketing to build brand awareness. Eventually, my business grew even larger, and by the time I was 30, I had a company with several employees, an expanding product line, and a steady stream of revenue. But looking back, I can't say it was easy. There were many sleepless nights, times when I thought about throwing in the towel, and days when I questioned if I was even doing the right thing. But I stuck with it, and it paid off. Now, I'm in a position where I'm able to mentor others who are just starting out. I've learned more from my failures than I ever did from my successes. The road to entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and it's definitely not a straight path. But I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. The most important lesson I've learned? There's no magic formula for success. It's all about consistency, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up. If you're willing to put in the work, face the challenges head-on, and adapt as the world changes around you, then there's nothing stopping you from building something truly great. I've come a long way from that small town, from a young kid with no real direction to a business owner who has finally figured out what it means to succeed. And now, as I look back on it all, I realize that the journey has been worth every single moment, every failure, every triumph, and every lesson learned. If you're thinking about starting your own business, take this as a sign. It's not going to be easy, and there will be days when you'll feel like giving up. But if you're determined and you keep pushing forward, the results will come. Trust me, if I can do it, you can too. I grew up in a small town where opportunities felt limited, and ambition was a rare trait. Everyone knew everyone, and life followed a routine. Go to school, get a job, settle down, rinse and repeat. But from a young age, I was always restless. I remember my first entrepreneurial venture when I was 12, trying to sell lemonade in front of my house. I made a whopping $5.50 that summer, but it was the first taste of freedom that money gave me. That $5.50 was more than just pocket change. It was a glimpse into a future where I could create something, build it, and profit from it. I didn't know it then, but that moment set me on a path I'd follow for the rest of my life. After high school, I knew I wasn't cut out for college. Everyone around me seemed focused on grades and diplomas, but I was more interested in the real world, business, economics, markets. I wanted to learn by doing, not by reading. So, I dropped out of college after one semester. People thought I was crazy. Some of my friends mocked me, saying I'd be back in a few months with my tail between my legs. But I didn't listen. I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't going to let conventional paths define my journey. I started working odd jobs, anything to get by while I figured out how to start a business. I worked as a waiter, as a construction laborer, and even as a dishwasher. Those jobs weren't glamorous, but they taught me a lot. For one, I learned the importance of hard work and humility. And two, I got to observe people, how they interacted, what they valued, and how they spent their money. I spent my evenings reading business books and watching YouTube videos about successful entrepreneurs. That's when I discovered a pattern. Most of the successful entrepreneurs weren't following the standard playbook. They weren't waiting for the perfect moment. They were creating it. It was in the summer of 2014 that I came across the idea for my first business. I was working as a dishwasher at a local restaurant when I overheard the owner talking about how expensive the restaurant supplies were. Plates, cups, silverware, it all added up. It struck me that if I could create a business that sold high-quality, affordable restaurant supplies, I could fill a gap in the market. The thought stayed with me for days, and by the end of the week, I started looking into suppliers. I didn't have much money, barely $2,000 to my name, but I took the leap. I found a supplier in China who could give me a better price on dishware and kitchen supplies than anything I could find locally. I created a basic website and started marketing to small restaurants in my area. I didn't know what I was doing. The website was ugly, my marketing strategy was non-existent, and I had no idea how to even invoice clients. But I had hustle. I sent cold emails to restaurant owners, offered them free delivery, and promised them discounts if they ordered in bulk. Slowly, but surely, I started making sales. The first sale felt like a punch of adrenaline. It wasn't a lot of money, only about $300, but it was a validation. Someone actually bought from me. That was the spark I needed. I kept reinvesting everything I made into the business. I upgraded the website, made better deals with suppliers, and started to understand the art of negotiation. I learned that business wasn't about getting everything perfect. It was about taking action and improving along the way. Within a year, my small operation had grown from a part-time hustle to a full-fledged business. I hired a couple of employees, expanded my product range, and started reaching out to more clients. But the road wasn't smooth. In fact, there were times when I thought I was going to fail. I ran into cash flow issues and found myself scrambling to cover bills. My supplier in China made a mistake, sending me the wrong shipment, and I lost a few big clients because of it. I remember lying awake at night, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But every failure was a lesson. Every mistake was an opportunity to refine my approach. I started learning from other entrepreneurs, attending business conferences, and even getting a mentor. Gradually, I learned the importance of delegation, customer service, and most importantly, resilience. In 2017, I landed a contract with a national restaurant chain. That deal was the game changer. It gave me the capital to scale, and more importantly, it gave me credibility. I went from being a small-town dishwasher to owning a company that supplied restaurant chains nationwide. As my business grew, so did my aspirations. I didn't want to just stop at restaurant supplies. I wanted to create a brand. I wanted to make a product that people would recognize, respect, and trust. So, in 2019, I launched a line of eco-friendly disposable cutlery and plates. The market for sustainable products was booming, and I wanted to capitalize on it. The problem was, I was competing with giants like Eco Products and Biopac, who had decades of experience. But I took a different approach. I focused on quality and design. While the other brands were focused on functionality, I made sure my products looked stylish and high-end, even though they were affordable. The eco-friendly brand took off, and in 2020, I sold my first $1 million worth of products. I couldn't believe it. After years of struggling, I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. The experience taught me the importance of timing, market research, and differentiation. If I tried to launch the eco-friendly line too early, it might not have worked. But by waiting until the market was ready, I was able to capitalize on a trend that was just beginning. By 2021, I had expanded into new markets and even started investing in other startups. I built a portfolio of companies in different sectors, from technology to food services. The best part? I was no longer a one-man show. I had a team of over 50 employees working with me, helping to scale the business and expand it further. I had gone from a small-town dishwasher to running a multi-million-dollar empire. It didn't happen overnight, and there were countless moments where I doubted myself. But I stuck with it. Now, as I look back on the journey, I realized that the key to success wasn't just about working hard. It was about being willing to fail, to learn, and to keep going. I made mistakes. I lost money. I faced rejection. But every failure made me stronger, smarter, and more prepared for the next challenge. The entrepreneurial journey is like planting a tree. It takes time to grow, but if you're patient and persistent, you'll eventually reap the rewards. I was just an average guy, living an average life in a small town. I never thought I'd end up an entrepreneur, let alone have a successful business. It all started back when I was in college, struggling to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I'd taken the usual route: go to school, get good grades, and figure things out later. But as much as I followed the script, something always felt off. I remember one night, after a particularly rough day, I was sitting in my dorm room, scrolling through my phone. An ad popped up for an online course about e-commerce. Now, I'd seen tons of ads for these kinds of courses before, and I always ignored them. But something about this one caught my attention. Maybe it was the fact that I was at a crossroads in my life, or maybe I was just bored. But I clicked on it. I signed up for the course, and, looking back, it's the best decision I ever made. The first few weeks were brutal. I didn't know anything about e-commerce, marketing, or even how to set up a website. The course covered everything from scratch: how to find products, how to market them, and how to manage your finances. I remember feeling overwhelmed. I had to teach myself how to create a website, learn about SEO, and deal with suppliers. But I also realized something: I enjoyed it. The challenge excited me. And with every new skill I learned, I felt like I was gaining more control over my future. By the time I finished the course, I had a basic online store set up. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started small, selling a few products that I thought people would want. I remember the first sale I made. It was like a jolt of energy coursing through me. Someone, a total stranger, had bought something I put together. That sale meant more to me than anything I could have imagined. It felt like the beginning of something big. But as with any new venture, things didn't go smoothly at first. I faced setbacks, long hours, and moments of doubt. My sales were low. My ads weren't working. I felt like I was doing everything wrong. I reached out to the community of people who'd taken the same course and started reading about their experiences. I learned that failure was part of the process. What mattered was getting back up, tweaking things, and learning from the mistakes. So, I kept pushing forward. I started experimenting with different marketing strategies, and eventually, something clicked. One day, I ran a promotion for a new product, and my sales spiked. I remember seeing the numbers go up, feeling a mixture of excitement and disbelief. That's when I realized that e-commerce was not just a hobby for me. It was a legitimate business opportunity. With my newfound success, I took the plunge and invested more money into my business. I hired freelancers to help with things I wasn't good at, like graphic design and copywriting. I began to focus on what I did best: product research, marketing, and scaling. I learned how to manage inventory, optimize my website for better conversion rates, and build customer loyalty. Slowly but surely, my little online store started to grow. But the real turning point came when I decided to launch my own brand. Instead of selling random products, I would create something unique, something that stood out. It was a risky move. I had to spend money on branding, packaging, and creating a website that felt professional. But I believed in my idea, and I knew I had something special. I still remember the day I launched my first branded product. It was a handmade leather wallet. I was terrified that it wouldn't sell, but within hours, I got my first order. And then another, and another. By the end of the month, my sales had doubled. I could hardly believe it. My brand had a story behind it, and people resonated with that. They weren't just buying a wallet, they were buying into my vision. From there, things really took off. I was making enough money to quit my day job and focus full-time on my business. I scaled my product line, added more items, and started building a real brand presence on social media. I learned how to leverage influencers to promote my products, and before I knew it, I was getting press coverage. My brand started gaining traction, and I felt like I was on the verge of something big. As the years went by, I expanded my operations. I hired more people, moved into a warehouse, and invested in better marketing. I started taking risks. Sometimes they paid off, sometimes they didn't, but I never gave up. I kept working, learning, and adapting. One of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur is learning how to manage your emotions. There are days when things go wrong. Orders get delayed, customers complain, and sales don't meet expectations. But I learned that resilience is key. On the tough days, I'd remind myself of how far I'd come. I'd look at the journey I'd taken, from that first sale in my dorm room to running a business that employed a team of people. Now, looking back on it, I realized that entrepreneurship is not just about making money. It's about creating something meaningful and being willing to take risks. It's about believing in your idea, even when everyone around you thinks you're crazy. It's about working harder than you've ever worked in your life, and sometimes failing, only to get back up and keep going. And above all, it's about the journey. I'm not the same person I was when I started. I'm more confident, more resilient, and more capable than I ever thought I could be. My business has grown exponentially, and while there are still challenges ahead, I know I can face them. I've built something from nothing, and that's something no one can ever take away from me. If there's one thing I've learned throughout this whole process, it's that anyone can do it. If you have a passion, a little bit of determination, and the willingness to learn from your mistakes, you can build a business. The journey will be hard, and there will be moments where you question everything. But if you keep going, the rewards can be incredible. I don't think I'll ever stop being an entrepreneur. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. Every day, I wake up excited to work on my business, and that's something I never thought I'd be able to say. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, I say this: start now. Don't wait for the perfect time. It will never come. Just take that first step and keep going. The journey will be worth it. I never thought I'd be sitting here today, reflecting on a journey that began with zero savings, no business experience, and just a burning desire to make something of myself. But here I am, in a corner office overlooking the city, thinking about how my life took an unexpected turn, all thanks to a chance encounter and a relentless pursuit of a dream. It all started back in 2015, when I was living paycheck to paycheck, working as a low-level marketing coordinator at a small tech company. I was in my mid-20s, disillusioned with the daily grind, and struggling to find meaning in the monotony of my job. I had big dreams, but I didn't have the funds, the connections, or the confidence to take the leap into entrepreneurship. The thought of leaving a stable job for the unknown was terrifying, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that I was meant for something bigger. One day, I was at a networking event for young professionals, something I didn't even want to attend but went because I felt I should, if I ever wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I almost didn't go, but something inside me pushed me to step outside my comfort zone. That's where I met Chris. Chris was a few years older than me, well-dressed, and exuded a sense of calm confidence that I admired. He wasn't like the other people at the event who were mostly in it for the free drinks or the opportunity to exchange business cards. Chris had purpose. We hit it off immediately, and he told me he had just started a small marketing agency. He seemed to be doing well, and his passion for his business was contagious. The more he spoke, the more I realized that he had built something from the ground up, just like I wanted to do. I felt an instant connection, and for the first time in a long while, I felt inspired. After that night, we exchanged contact information and kept in touch. Chris, sensing my dissatisfaction with my job, encouraged me to start something on the side, something small at first, just to test the waters. He suggested I start a consulting business, offering marketing advice to small local businesses. I had no idea where to begin, but he offered to mentor me and help me get started. The first few months were brutal. I spent every free moment after work trying to build my business, hustling to find clients, and learning as I went. I didn't have any formal training in business, and the learning curve was steep. I was making mistakes left and right, and I had moments where I questioned whether I had made the right decision. But there was something about the freedom of working for myself that kept me going. It wasn't about the money, it was about building something that was mine. By the end of that year, I had managed to land a few clients, mostly small businesses that couldn't afford big agencies. They were looking for affordable, effective marketing solutions, and that's where I came in. I was scrappy, working from home, using every resource I could find to make my business work. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was learning so much. More importantly, I was starting to believe in myself. In early 2017, I took a risk. I quit my full-time job. I had saved up enough money to cover my living expenses for 6 months, and I decided that if I didn't make my business work now, I never would. It was a terrifying decision, but something inside me knew that I had to go all in. The first few months after quitting were rough. I had a few contracts, but not enough to pay myself consistently. My savings dwindled faster than I had anticipated. There were nights when I would lie awake in bed, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I considered getting a part-time job to supplement my income, but I didn't want to give up on my dream. I kept pushing forward, sending emails, reaching out to potential clients, and refining my pitch. Then, in the summer of 2017, things started to click. I landed a big client, a local restaurant chain that had just opened its first location. They needed help with branding, social media marketing, and digital advertising. It was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I worked day and night on their campaigns, going above and beyond to make sure everything was perfect. In just a few months, we saw a significant increase in foot traffic to their restaurants. They were thrilled with the results and asked me to manage their entire marketing strategy. That was the turning point. Once I had one big client, more followed. My business started to grow exponentially. By the end of 2018, I had hired my first employee, and we were handling multiple clients at once. My agency, which had started as a one-person operation, was now a small team with a handful of talented individuals. We had a steady stream of clients, and I was making more money than I had ever dreamed possible. But success came with its own set of challenges. As the business grew, so did the complexity. Managing a team, handling multiple projects, and keeping clients happy became a full-time job in itself. I had to learn how to be a leader, not just a service provider. I invested in myself, taking courses on leadership, hiring a business coach, and reading as much as I could about growing a company. In 2019, we hit another milestone. Our agency was doing well enough that we could afford to invest in more advanced marketing technologies, which allowed us to scale our operations even further. We started working with larger companies, and our reputation in the industry began to grow. I was traveling to conferences, speaking at events, and networking with influential people in the business world. Fast forward to today, and my agency is one of the leading marketing firms in the city. We've worked with national brands, and our team has grown to 30 employees. I've learned so much about business, leadership, and what it truly means to be an entrepreneur. It hasn't been easy. There have been setbacks, failures, and moments when I doubted myself. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of consistent effort, learning from mistakes, and never giving up, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It requires resilience, creativity, and a willingness to keep pushing forward, even when things aren't going your way. I'm not the same person I was back in 2015, someone who was stuck in a job they hated and didn't believe in their own potential. Today, I'm proud of the business I've built, and I'm grateful for the people who helped me along the way. I'm living proof that with the right mindset, a little bit of luck, and a lot of hard work, anything is possible. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: take the leap. It's scary, it's hard, and it's full of uncertainty. But it's also the most rewarding thing you can do. Find something you're passionate about, surround yourself with people who support you, and never stop learning. Your journey might not look like mine, but if you keep going, you'll get there in the end. If I can do it, so can you. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was just 25, fresh out of college, with a degree in computer science and a head full of dreams. I had no job lined up, no connections, and honestly, not much of a clue on how the real world worked. I had been an honors student, the kind of kid who aced exams but never got the practical side of things. But I had an idea, and at the time, that felt like enough. I had been working on a side project throughout college, a mobile app that would help small businesses manage their inventory in real time. It was something I came up with after working part-time at a local store where the owner was constantly behind on tracking stock. I knew it was a problem many small business owners faced, so I spent months after class coding and refining the app. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and it looked decent. When I graduated, I figured the best option was to dive straight into starting my own business. I wasn't afraid of failing. In fact, I welcomed the challenge. What I didn't realize was just how much of a roller coaster ride I was about to go on. I didn't have much savings, just a couple of $1,000s I had saved from my part-time jobs. I was living with my parents at the time, which helped keep the pressure low. But the first few months were brutal. I spent every waking hour either coding, tweaking the app, or trying to reach out to potential customers. And I did it all myself: marketing, customer support, design, everything. I didn't hire anyone because I couldn't afford to. The first version of the app wasn't great, but it worked. I launched it with a lot of excitement, thinking it would be a hit. It wasn't. In fact, it barely got any attention. I was trying to break into a market that was already saturated, and my app wasn't even that different from the other products out there. But I kept pushing. I spent hours cold calling businesses, walking into local shops, and offering free trials. Some said yes, most said no, and a few ignored me completely. But I didn't give up. Every no only fueled my drive to prove myself right. The hardest part was convincing myself that I wasn't failing. Every time I sent out an email and received no reply, or every time someone said my app wasn't worth their time, I questioned everything. Then, about 3 months into it, I got a break. A local bakery chain, struggling with their inventory management, took a chance on my app. I was ecstatic. This was my first real customer, and they signed up for a 1-year contract. I didn't know it at the time, but that deal would end up changing everything. I spent the next 6 months working closely with the bakery. I constantly updated the app, fixed bugs, and added new features based on their feedback. At one point, I thought the whole thing would fall apart because I was burning myself out. There was never enough time in the day to get everything done. But I kept at it, often working late into the night, sometimes for days straight. Eventually, word got around. The bakery chain loved the app, and they told their friends in the food industry about it. More clients came in, and soon enough, I was able to hire my first employee. This was huge for me. Up until then, I had been doing everything myself, designing, coding, customer support, you name it. Now I had someone to share the load with. The stress didn't go away, but at least I had someone to talk to about it. But things didn't get smoother immediately. One day, about a year after I launched the business, I received an email from a competitor saying they had built something similar and wanted to buy me out. At first, I laughed it off. But then, I saw the details. Their app was more polished, they had funding, and their marketing was far better than mine. I had been working on a shoestring budget, and this was a real threat. I took a week to think it over. I didn't want to sell. I believed in my product, and I believed in my customers. But I also had to admit that I wasn't scaling fast enough. I was still just one guy, trying to juggle everything. In the end, I turned down the offer and made a huge decision. I needed outside funding to scale the company, or it would never reach its full potential. Raising capital wasn't easy. I pitched to dozens of investors, and most of them said no. They didn't see the potential in what I was doing. But one day, I got a yes. A small venture capital firm believed in me. They gave me the funding I needed, and just like that, everything changed. With the money, I hired a team. I brought in people who were better than me at things I didn't know how to do: marketing, sales, and design. They took the app to the next level. My days of being a one-man band were over. But, of course, this didn't come without new challenges. The pressure skyrocketed. As a small startup, we had to keep moving fast. We couldn't afford to be slow or complacent. There were endless meetings, deadlines, and goals to hit. But I had a team that was just as passionate about the product as I was, and that made all the difference. Years passed, and the company grew. We expanded our client base, improved the app, and began attracting larger companies. We launched new features, implemented AI for better inventory predictions, and started getting noticed in the industry. The app that I had started in my bedroom was now a major player in the market. In the end, we were acquired by a much larger company, and that was both an end and a beginning. The acquisition deal was huge, but the experience of building something from nothing was the real reward. I had built a company from the ground up, navigated countless obstacles, and learned more than I could have imagined. But I never forget the hardest part of it all, the beginning. The doubts, the cold calls, the failures, and the long nights. They were the foundation that led to the success. Now, I look back and realize that those tough times weren't the setback I thought they were. They were the moments that prepared me for everything that came after. And as I sit here today, a bit older and hopefully wiser, I realize that being an entrepreneur isn't about having everything figured out at the start. It's about persistence, learning from your mistakes, and always pushing forward, no matter how many doors close along the way. It's been a wild ride, but I wouldn't change a thing. I never imagined that I would go from being a broke college dropout to owning a thriving tech company. But looking back now, the journey was anything but simple, and the obstacles I faced were often more intense than I had ever expected. This is the story of how I built something from almost nothing, navigating failure after failure, and eventually creating a business that has changed my life. It all started when I dropped out of college in my sophomore year. I was a decent student, nothing spectacular, but I kept my grades high enough to avoid attention. However, deep down, I wasn't passionate about what I was learning. Every class felt like a waste of time, and the more I attended, the more I realized I was just following a conventional path that everyone around me seemed to take. I didn't want that life. I've always had an interest in technology, especially coding and web development. I remember building my first website when I was 12, which was just a simple page about my favorite video games. That passion stayed with me through the years, and in the back of my mind, I always thought I could turn that love into something more. So, one day, I made the decision. I was going to drop out and try to make something of myself. Everyone told me I was crazy, especially my parents. They thought I was throwing my future away. After dropping out, I spent most of my time in my apartment teaching myself coding and experimenting with different ideas. At first, nothing worked. I tried to build apps, create websites for local businesses, and even designed a few simple games, but nothing caught on. I barely made enough money to cover my rent, and I had to pick up odd jobs like walking dogs and delivering food just to survive. There were nights when I'd stare at my computer screen, frustrated and wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. I remember thinking, maybe I should go back to college. But I refused to give up. It wasn't until I decided to work on a side project for a local startup that things started to change. I was hired to help them create a user-friendly platform for their services. The company had been around for a while, but they were struggling to keep up with competitors in the space. I spent weeks building and improving their website, and in the process, I learned more than I ever could from a textbook. They saw how dedicated I was, and soon, I was hired full-time. Working at that startup was an eye-opening experience. I didn't just code. I got a taste of the real-world challenges that come with running a business. I learned about marketing, sales, and customer acquisition, and I began to understand the financial side of running a company. For the first time, I saw that there was a way to turn my skills into something more than just a hobby. The only problem? The company I worked for had a strict hierarchy, and the opportunities for advancement were limited. I knew that if I wanted to build something of my own, I needed to take a leap of faith. So, after 2 years of working at the startup, I decided to leave. I didn't have much saved up, just a few $1,000s, but I was confident that I could make it work. I rented a small office space, started networking with other entrepreneurs, and began brainstorming ideas. At first, I thought about creating a tech consultancy, helping small businesses build websites and apps. But as I spoke to more people, I realized that the market was oversaturated. I needed something unique. That's when the idea for a project management tool hit me. It was during a late-night brainstorming session when I thought about all the tools I had used in my own work. Nothing out there truly solved the issues I had with organizing tasks, tracking progress, and collaborating with teams. Sure, there were a few tools that came close, but they were either too complicated or too basic. I realized I could build something that was simple to use, intuitive, and powerful enough to handle complex projects. I spent the next 6 months developing the prototype. The first version was rough. I worked with a small team of freelance designers to create a clean, modern UI. I built the backend myself, using technologies I had learned over the years. When it was finally ready, I launched it with a basic website and a few email campaigns. The response was underwhelming, to say the least. I didn't get many sign-ups at first, and I quickly realized that I had missed a crucial part of the equation: marketing. I had thought that if I built a good product, people would naturally flock to it. But I learned the hard way that's not how it works. You need to build an audience first, then deliver the value. I was spending all my time coding, but I wasn't giving enough attention to how to actually reach the right people. I started reading books about marketing, took online courses, and reached out to influencers in the project management space for advice. Slowly but surely, I began to refine my approach. After months of fine-tuning my marketing strategies, the product began to gain traction. I started seeing steady sign-ups, and the feedback from early users was overwhelmingly positive. But as the user base grew, so did the demands on the platform. I couldn't keep up with customer support, and the servers were often overloaded. I had to hire my first full-time employee, someone who could help with customer support and manage the servers. Hiring my first employee felt like a huge milestone. Up until that point, I had done everything myself. But as the company grew, I quickly realized that I couldn't do it all alone. I hired a small team, and together, we scaled the product. Our tool became a go-to solution for many small businesses and teams, and we added new features every month based on user feedback. Eventually, we reached a point where we needed additional funding to grow even further. I pitched to several investors and finally secured a round of funding. That investment gave us the resources to expand our marketing efforts, improve the product, and scale our operations. Within a year of securing the funding, our user base grew exponentially, and we were able to hire more talent. Today, my company is valued at over $50 million, and we have a dedicated team of 50 people. We've helped thousands of businesses streamline their project management, and we're constantly evolving the platform to meet the needs of our users. But as I look back on how far we've come, I remember those early days of uncertainty and struggle. I could have easily given up at any point along the way, but I didn't. The most important lesson I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes persistence, adaptability, and a willingness to learn from failure. If I had let the early setbacks deter me, I would have never built this company. In the end, it wasn't the product or the funding that made the difference. It was my mindset. Keep going, keep learning, and don't be afraid to fail. I'm living proof that it's possible to build something from nothing, even when the odds are stacked against you. It was the summer of 2017, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed, scrolling through my phone in a dimly lit room. My heart was racing, not because of anything on my screen, but because of what I had just done. I had quit my 9-to-5 job. I was 25 years old, living in a modest apartment in a city I had just moved to, with nothing but an idea and a dream to work with. I had worked in marketing for 3 years, and though I was decent at it, I never felt the passion that others seemed to have. The spark never ignited for me. The job was secure, and the pay was good enough for someone my age. But I always felt like I was stuck in a cycle, like a hamster running on a wheel, going nowhere. So, after months of late-night thinking, planning, and second-guessing, I made the leap into the unknown. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't keep living the way I had been. I had been tinkering with the idea of starting a business for a while. I had a knack for solving problems, and over the years, I had developed a deep passion for health and fitness. I was always that guy who tried every new fitness routine, every supplement, every diet, and I loved sharing my experience with friends. But what if I could share that knowledge with the world? What if I could build a platform where people could find the right information and products they needed to live healthier lives? It was the seed of an idea that planted itself in my brain and refused to leave. So, I started working on it in the evenings after my regular job, sacrificing weekends and late nights. I built a website, created content, and launched a small online store that offered fitness equipment, supplements, and workout plans. At the time, it was nothing fancy, just a basic e-commerce store. I had no technical background, so I used a drag-and-drop website builder, hoping it would be enough to get things off the ground. I remember the first sale I ever made. It wasn't much, just a $15 protein powder, but it felt like winning the lottery. It was confirmation that there was a market for what I was offering. That small win made me believe that I could turn this into something bigger. I began posting regularly on social media, sharing fitness tips, workout routines, and product recommendations. Slowly but surely, I started gaining a following. People were engaging with my content and, more importantly, buying my products. But here's where things started to get real. As much as I had been excited about my little side hustle, the reality of running a business hit me fast. I was trying to juggle my job, build a website, create content, handle customer service, manage inventory, and market the business. I had no idea what I was doing. I was burning the candle at both ends, and I could feel myself starting to crack under the pressure. The passion was still there, but I was overwhelmed. One evening, around the 4-month mark, I came to a breaking point. I was up at 2 a.m. working on my website, after having spent the entire day at the office. I had just received an email from a customer complaining that their product hadn't arrived, even though I had shipped it on time. I had no system in place to track shipments, no reliable customer service process, and no help. I had the realization that if I didn't take this more seriously, I was going to burn out before I ever saw real success. That night, I decided to take a step back. I stopped taking random advice from people who had no idea what they were talking about, and I started doing real research into what it took to run a business. I invested time in learning about supply chain management, marketing strategies, and customer service. I joined online communities where entrepreneurs like myself shared their experiences. I even hired a consultant to help me refine my business model and set up a solid marketing plan. I began focusing on systems and processes that would make the business scalable. The most important change I made was hiring my first employee. It was a huge leap of faith, but I couldn't do everything myself anymore. I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service and a fulfillment manager to take care of shipping. That allowed me to focus on growing the brand and adding value to the community I was building. By the end of the first year, I had quit my day job and was running my business full-time. It was still small, but it was profitable, and I was finally getting the hang of it. The real turning point came when I launched my first product line, a series of workout gear designed for home use. I had spent months working on it, sourcing the materials, testing the prototypes, and building the brand around it. When I launched, it was an instant hit. People loved it, and the sales started pouring in. That product line became my business's flagship and brought in enough revenue to expand my team. However, just as things started to take off, I faced another challenge. My business was growing so fast that I couldn't keep up with the demand. I had hit a plateau, and if I didn't scale quickly, I would lose all the momentum I had built. I needed more capital, more resources, and a bigger team. The idea of getting investors terrified me. I had no idea what it was like to pitch to people who had money, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that kind of pressure. But I knew that I couldn't do it alone anymore. I started attending networking events, pitching my business to angel investors, and eventually secured a small seed investment that allowed me to hire a full-time marketing team and expand my product offerings. With the new capital, I launched a comprehensive advertising campaign that targeted fitness enthusiasts across social media platforms, reaching millions of people. The sales numbers were staggering, and my brand quickly gained recognition in the industry. Fast forward to today, and my business is no longer the small side hustle it once was. It's a full-fledged brand with a team of 50 employees, a large online presence, and a loyal customer base. We've expanded beyond fitness products to offer a wide range of wellness items, and we're continuously innovating with new offerings. Looking back, the journey has been anything but easy. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I almost threw in the towel. But every challenge taught me something new, and every failure brought me closer to the person I am today. I built a company from the ground up, not by having a perfect plan, but by embracing the struggle and learning from it. The hardest part wasn't starting the business. It was the mental battle of believing that I could actually make it work. And now, I'm living proof that you can go from having nothing to building something meaningful if you're willing to put in the work. So, to anyone reading this who's thinking about starting their own business, take the leap. It won't be easy, and there will be times when you question everything. But if you keep going, you'll look back and realize how far you've come. There's no magic formula for success. It's just persistence, resilience, and learning from your mistakes. And most importantly, it's about having the courage to keep going when the road ahead seems uncertain. That's the story of how I went from quitting my job to running a successful business. It's not a fairy tale, but it's mine, and I wouldn't change a thing. I still remember the exact moment I decided to drop everything and go after my dream. It was the middle of the night, and I was sitting in my cramped apartment in downtown Los Angeles. The flickering lights of my cheap desk lamp cast shadows on the walls as I stared at my laptop screen. There, in front of me, was a spreadsheet full of numbers, clients, deadlines, and targets. It was a typical day at the ad agency I worked for. I had a solid job with a steady paycheck, but something felt wrong. I wasn't living for myself. I was working for someone else's dream, not my own. It had been 5 years since I graduated from college. During those years, I'd climbed the corporate ladder faster than I expected, impressing my bosses with my work ethic and creativity. But something was missing. I was burning out, and despite the nice salary, health benefits, and the occasional praise from the higher-ups, I felt unfulfilled. I had a deep craving to do something that truly mattered, to create something that would outlast me. But what? And how? I remember one of the first pieces of advice I had gotten from my mentor at the agency. He said, "If you want to build something, it has to solve a problem. That's how you find your market. Find a pain point and fix it." The problem was, I wasn't sure what the pain point was. I had heard countless success stories about people launching businesses from their garages or their kitchens, but I couldn't figure out where to even start. That night, sitting in front of my laptop, I started scrolling through some articles about entrepreneurship. A few articles caught my attention. They talked about starting small, testing your idea, and not being afraid of failure. But then something hit me. It wasn't just the idea I was missing. It was the drive to push through when everything felt uncertain. I knew I had to take a leap of faith. But what was the right leap? I took a deep breath, closed my laptop, and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow was going to be different. The next morning, I woke up with a singular goal: to create something of my own. But I didn't want to start with just any random idea. I wanted it to be something I cared about. After all, If I was going to leave the stability of my current job, I had to make sure I would be fully invested in whatever I did. I started thinking about the things I had always been passionate about. I loved fashion, but I wasn't sure how to break into that industry. I liked tech, but I wasn't a coder. Then it hit me, fitness. I had always been a fitness enthusiast. I had tried countless apps, gym memberships, workout programs, and diet plans. And while some worked, most didn't. I realized that there was a huge gap in the market for a truly personalized fitness experience. A solution that wasn't just one size fits all, but catered to people's unique needs, goals, and lifestyles. That's when I knew what my business would be. A custom fitness app that offered personalized workout routines, nutrition plans, and accountability, all backed by real human coaches. I spent the next few weeks researching everything I could about the fitness industry, the tech behind apps, and how to build a startup from scratch. I spoke to a few friends who were fitness coaches, health experts, and even a couple of developers. I learned that creating an app from the ground up wasn't as simple as I had hoped, but the more I learned, the more determined I became. I wasn't just building an app. I was building a solution for people who were struggling to reach their fitness goals. But that's when reality hit. I had no money to fund the development of an app. I was living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to cover rent and utilities. So, I did what any sane person would do in that situation. I put everything on the line. I maxed out my credit cards, took out a small loan, and borrowed money from a few friends and family members. The risk was enormous, but I believed in the idea so strongly that I couldn't back down. Building the first version of the app was brutal. I had no coding experience, so I had to hire developers to bring my vision to life. I spent countless sleepless nights managing the project, making sure every detail was perfect. There were a million setbacks, bugs in the app, problems with the user interface, delays in the launch, but I kept pushing forward. I refused to let the frustration break my spirit. Months later, after all the stress, sweat, and tears, we finally launched the first version of the app. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and that was enough. We put it on the App Store and started marketing it through social media, ads, and word of mouth. I was prepared for failure, but I also knew this was my chance to prove myself. The first few weeks were slow. I didn't have a huge following, and marketing was difficult on a tight budget. But then, something unexpected happened. A few fitness influencers caught wind of the app, and they started sharing it with their audiences. Their followers loved the app, and soon we were getting thousands of downloads every week. The positive reviews started pouring in, and it was like a snowball effect. The more users we had, the more we could reinvest into marketing, development, and growing the business. The next few months were a blur of growth, excitement, and stress. We expanded the team, added new features to the app, and started offering personalized coaching services. I finally quit my day job and went full-time into the business. Every day felt like a victory, but also like a fight. I was constantly juggling between scaling the business and dealing with all the challenges that come with running a startup. There were moments when I thought I might not make it, but every time, I kept going. Fast forward to a year later. The app had become one of the top-rated fitness apps in its category, and we were generating more revenue than I ever dreamed possible. I had built a business from scratch, and I could finally say I was living my dream. The feeling of waking up every morning and working on something I was truly passionate about was indescribable. Sure, there were still challenges, but they were the kind of challenges I loved facing. Looking back, I realized that the key to my success wasn't just the idea. It was the willingness to take risks, the ability to learn from failure, and the determination to push through when things got tough. I could have played it safe, stayed in my comfortable job, and avoided all the uncertainty, but I would have never experienced the fulfillment I have now. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, I have one piece of advice: go for it. But don't expect it to be easy. Be ready to sacrifice, to fail, and to learn. Success isn't just about having a great idea. It's about the persistence to keep moving forward when everything else seems to be against you. I'm still working on the business every day, constantly evolving and improving. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And that's all that matters. I never imagined that one day I'd be sitting in a meeting room with investors, discussing the future of my company. For someone who started from scratch with zero business knowledge, it felt surreal. But that's where I am today, a successful entrepreneur with a company that's poised for significant growth. But the journey to this point wasn't easy. and it definitely wasn't linear. It all started when I was 23, fresh out of college. I had no clear career path, but I had a burning desire to do something different. I wasn't going to sit in a cubicle following the same routine every day like most of my friends who had landed comfortable office jobs. I wanted more. I wanted to create something of my own, something that could have an impact, even if I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there. I had always been interested in tech. I was the kid who would disassemble old gadgets just to see how they worked. But at that time, I didn't have the skills to build anything from scratch. So I started small. I thought to myself, what can I do with the skills I have? And that's when I came up with the idea of launching a small online store selling tech accessories. At first, I didn't even have enough money to buy inventory. I sold some of my old stuff, things like gadgets I no longer used, a few personal belongings, and even my old car. I scraped together a small amount of cash, and with that, I started my journey into entrepreneurship. The problem was that I didn't have a clear understanding of marketing, sales, or supply chains. I quickly realized that selling online wasn't as simple as setting up a website and hoping people would buy from me. I had to figure out everything from scratch. I remember sitting in my apartment late at night, researching how to drive traffic to my website, how to make my listings more attractive, and how to handle customer service. I made tons of mistakes along the way. One of the first major ones was not optimizing my website for mobile users, which caused my sales to be abysmal in the first few months. I didn't know anything about SEO, so my website was buried deep in the search results. I wasn't getting any organic traffic, and the ads I was running were burning through my limited budget without much return. It was frustrating. But, as is often the case with entrepreneurship, you learn by doing. Every mistake was a lesson, and every failure taught me something new. I reached out to people who knew more than I did, soaking up as much information as I could. I hired a mentor to guide me through some of the basics of business. Slowly but surely, I began to figure things out. After a few months of trial and error, my little online store started to get some traction. I was no longer just selling to friends and family. I was starting to see regular customers who found me through Google and word of mouth. My sales were still modest, but it was progress. By the time I turned 25, I had made enough money to reinvest into the business and improve the user experience. I upgraded my website, invested in better products, and refined my marketing strategy. But that's when things took a turn I wasn't expecting. I received an email from a well-known tech accessory company, one that I had always admired. They were offering to buy my business. At first, I thought it was a scam. Why would a major company be interested in my small operation? But after some back and forth, I realized they were serious. They saw potential in what I had built and wanted to absorb my brand into their portfolio. I spent weeks considering the offer. The idea of selling was tempting. The money they were offering would set me up for life. But at the same time, I wasn't sure I was ready to walk away from what I had created. I had put everything into this business, and it felt like giving up, even though it was an incredibly lucrative offer. Eventually, I turned them down. I wasn't ready to sell, and I didn't want to be a small piece in someone else's empire. I wanted to build my own empire. That decision turned out to be one of the best I've ever made. I used the money I would have gotten from the sale to reinvest in the business. I hired a small team of people who shared my vision and who were as passionate about the company as I was. We started expanding our product line and introducing new features. Slowly but surely, our brand started gaining recognition. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to focus on a niche market. Instead of trying to compete with the giants in the tech accessory industry, I decided to target a very specific audience: tech enthusiasts who cared about sustainability. I started sourcing eco-friendly materials and created a line of products that were both high quality and environmentally responsible. This was a huge gamble. At the time, sustainability wasn't a huge selling point in the tech world, but it was something I deeply believed in, and it turned out to be a game changer for my business. Within a year, our sales skyrocketed. Word spread quickly about the new product line, and the media started picking up on it. I even started getting invitations to speak at tech conferences, which helped increase our visibility even more. Investors started noticing our potential, and soon enough, I was being approached by venture capitalists who wanted to help us grow even further. In the past few years, my company has gone from a small, scrappy online store to a recognized brand in the tech industry. We've expanded internationally, and we've continued to innovate with new, eco-friendly products. We've even started offering subscription boxes for customers who want to receive sustainable tech accessories every month. And through all of this, I've managed to stay true to my original vision of creating something meaningful and different. I won't lie, there were times when I doubted myself. There were plenty of days when I thought about quitting. But looking back now, I realized that every failure, every tough decision, and every late-night brainstorming session was worth it. I've built something that I'm incredibly proud of, and I've created jobs for people who are just as passionate about sustainability as I am. I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and being willing to adapt. You have to be persistent, and most importantly, you have to believe in your vision even when others don't. I'm living proof that it's possible to start from nothing and build something great, even if you don't have all the answers at the beginning. Today, I look back at that young, uncertain 23-year-old and realize just how far I've come. I've learned more than I ever thought possible, and I'm excited for what the future holds. I'm not done yet, far from it. The journey is still ongoing, and there are so many new challenges and opportunities ahead. But I'm ready for them, and I'm proud of everything I've built so far. If I can do it, so can you. The key is to never give up and always keep pushing forward. I was 25 when I decided to quit my job and try to build my own business. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it felt like the only option left. I had always dreamed of being my own boss, but I had been so afraid of failure that I spent years sitting in a cubicle, watching other people chase their own dreams while I pushed papers for someone else. The moment I realized I couldn't do it anymore was one random Tuesday morning. I had been working at a marketing agency for almost 3 years. I'd moved from entry-level to a mid-level manager in that time, but it felt like I had hit a ceiling. The work was no longer exciting. The paycheck was fine, but I felt like I was going through the motions. I'd been spending my evenings watching entrepreneurship videos on YouTube, reading books, and researching side hustle ideas, but fear kept holding me back. Fear of failure, fear of not having enough money, fear of not being good enough, just a whole lot of fear. That morning, as I sat in yet another meeting that felt like a waste of time, I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. I'm wasting my life. I walked out of the meeting and went straight to HR. I handed in my resignation letter, effective immediately. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have investors. I didn't have anything except a dream and a burning desire to make it work. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I had to take that first step. I spent the next few months researching every niche I could think of, trying to figure out what business idea would work for me. I considered dropshipping, affiliate marketing, digital products, and even starting a podcast, but nothing felt right. I didn't have the budget for inventory, and I didn't want to risk too much upfront money. Eventually, I stumbled upon an idea that clicked, starting a subscription box service for niche products. It seemed like the perfect fit. I could start small, scale up, and not need a huge initial investment. The concept was simple: create a subscription box filled with high-quality, niche products that customers would be excited to receive every month. But there was a catch. I wanted to focus on local artisans and small brands that weren't getting the exposure they deserved. The market for subscription boxes was already saturated, but I knew I could differentiate myself by offering unique products and supporting small businesses. I started by reaching out to local suppliers and explaining my idea. To my surprise, many of them were excited about the prospect of being featured in a subscription box. I had no clue how to negotiate prices or set up partnerships, but I learned quickly. I also started designing the website and learning how to market it. I created a brand around the idea of supporting local talent and offering customers a curated experience they wouldn't find anywhere else. At first, I had no idea what I was doing. I spent long hours watching tutorials on how to set up Shopify, how to run Facebook ads, how to create effective email campaigns, and basically everything I could to learn about digital marketing. I even went so far as to study basic SEO, which felt like learning a whole new language. There were days when I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. I would try something and fail. I would spend hours tweaking the website only for it to look terrible. I spent my nights learning how to build an audience on social media and ended up making every possible mistake you could make. One of the biggest challenges I faced in the beginning was getting my first customers. Even though I had an amazing product and an exciting concept, no one knew who I was. I had no brand recognition, no following, and no credibility. My first sale came 2 months into the process. It was to a friend of mine who felt sorry for me, but I didn't care. That first sale meant everything. It meant someone out there believed in my vision enough to give me a chance. It felt like the start of something real. After that, things started to pick up. Slowly but surely, I started getting more orders. I began investing in targeted ads, focusing on local audiences who would appreciate the idea of supporting small businesses. I didn't have a huge budget, but I made every dollar count. I learned the importance of testing and iterating every campaign I ran. I would analyze the results, tweak my approach, and try again. One of the things that helped me the most during this time was getting involved in online communities. I joined a few Facebook groups for entrepreneurs and started networking with other business owners. I found a few mentors who were willing to offer advice. Some of them were successful entrepreneurs who had been through the grind and knew exactly what I was going through. Others were fellow beginners like me, and we would exchange tips and support each other. There were days when I thought about quitting, but those communities kept me going. The turning point for me came when I was able to build a solid email list. I offered a free downloadable guide on how to find unique, high-quality products locally, and people started signing up. That list became one of my most valuable assets. I learned how to nurture those subscribers, offer them exclusive deals, and eventually convert them into paying customers. As the business grew, I realized that my initial fears were holding me back from my full potential. I had been afraid of failure, but what I didn't realize was that failure was a part of the process. Each time I failed, I learned something new. I learned how to handle rejection, how to deal with negative feedback, and how to pivot when things weren't working. Failure wasn't the end. It was just part of the journey. 2 years after I quit my job, I was making more money than I had ever made working for someone else. The subscription box business was doing well, and I was starting to expand into other areas, like collaborating with local brands on limited edition products and offering subscription options for corporate gifts. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I'm proud of what I've built. I no longer feel stuck in a cubicle. I get to wake up every day and work on something I'm passionate about. It wasn't a straight path, and it didn't happen overnight, but I'm living proof that if you take the risk, put in the work, and keep going, anything is possible. My advice to anyone thinking about quitting their job to start a business is this: you will fail. You will struggle. But you will learn more in those moments than you ever will in any classroom or training session. Don't be afraid to fail. Embrace it. Learn from it. Keep moving forward. And most importantly, take the first step. It's the hardest one, but it's the one that will change everything. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. To be honest, I never thought I'd ever make it past my 9-to-5 job as an accountant at a corporate firm. I'd been there for almost 3 years when something happened that completely changed the trajectory of my life. It started small, like most big things do, quietly, almost imperceptibly. But when I look back, I can see that day was the turning point, the beginning of everything. It all started with a conversation I had with a friend of mine, Dave. We had known each other since college, but over the years, we had fallen out of touch a bit. He was always the entrepreneurial one, always chasing new ventures and ideas. I, on the other hand, was content. I had a steady job, a nice office, and the comfort of knowing I had a paycheck coming every 2 weeks. But one day, we met up for a coffee after not seeing each other for months. We caught up, shared stories, talked about life and work, and then the conversation turned to business. I wasn't surprised when Dave started talking about the latest thing he was into, an app idea he had been working on. "It's a game changer, man," he said, sipping his coffee. "You know how everyone is always struggling with budgeting and saving money, right? This app will change the way people manage their personal finances." At first, I didn't think much of it. I had heard so many startup pitches before. Most of them were nothing special. But as he kept talking, I started to get intrigued. The more he spoke, the more I realized that Dave wasn't just blowing smoke. He actually had something that made sense. He wasn't just aiming to create another app. He was trying to solve a real problem. "How can I help?" I asked, genuinely curious. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I felt something stirring inside me. Dave smiled. "I need someone who knows numbers. Someone who can handle the financial side of things. You're perfect for it." I hesitated. I had always been comfortable behind a desk, crunching numbers for someone else. The thought of doing something different, something more risky, was terrifying. But there was something in Dave's excitement, his passion, that made me think. What if this was my chance? What if this was my moment? I told him I'd think about it. We parted ways, but I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. The more I reflected, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't living the life I had always dreamed of. I had settled into the safety of my routine, but deep down, I wanted more. I wanted to create something of my own, something that would allow me to build my future on my terms. It took me a week to make up my mind, but eventually, I called Dave and told him I was in. We would build this app together. The first few months were a blur. We were working out of a small, cramped office, with minimal equipment, just the two of us and a few hired developers. I had no idea what I was doing. I was an accountant, not a business owner. But every day, I learned something new. I would spend hours reading books and articles on entrepreneurship, marketing, and finance. I spent countless nights poring over spreadsheets, trying to make sense of cash flow, projections, and investments. The learning curve was steep, but I was determined to make it work. The early days were tough. We were operating on a shoestring budget, and every dollar mattered. Dave and I would argue about marketing strategies, features for the app, and even the smallest design details. There were times when I wondered if we were making a huge mistake. But then, out of nowhere, we started to gain some traction. Our app, which was originally met with skepticism, started to attract users. Slowly but surely, the word started spreading. But with success came challenges. We weren't prepared for the rapid growth that followed. Our servers crashed multiple times, customer support emails piled up, and we faced constant pressure to deliver more, faster. There were moments when I thought about throwing in the towel, when I questioned whether we were cut out for this. But we persevered. The turning point came about a year after we launched the app. We were featured in a major tech publication, and overnight, our user base exploded. The app was everywhere, and suddenly, we were no longer just two guys working out of a small office. We were a startup with investors, employees, and a brand to protect. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. We've raised millions in funding, expanded our team, and even launched new features that have taken the app to new heights. But the truth is, we didn't get here because we had the best idea or the perfect product. We got here because we refused to give up. We worked tirelessly, made countless sacrifices, and learned from every failure along the way. In the end, I think the most important lesson I've learned is that entrepreneurship isn't about having all the answers. It's about taking risks, embracing uncertainty, and being willing to put in the work. I'm not saying it's easy, far from it. But if you believe in what you're doing and are willing to learn from your mistakes, success can come. Now, 3 years later, I'm not the same person I was when I started. I've learned so much about business, about myself, and about what it means to take a leap of faith. I still don't know if I'll be an entrepreneur forever, but I know that taking that first step with Dave was the best decision I ever made. And to think, it all started with a simple cup of coffee and a conversation. The journey is far from over, but I can finally say with confidence, I'm living my dream, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. Even as a kid, I tried to come up with little schemes to make money, selling lemonade, organizing neighborhood garage sales, you name it. But when I hit my 20s, I found myself working at a desk job I hated, dreaming of a life where I called the shots. Little did I know my big break would come from something unexpected and, honestly, a little embarrassing. This is the story of how I built my business from the ground up, with a mix of luck, determination, and a lot of trial and error. It all started in 2015 when I was 25. I was working as a project manager at a marketing firm in my hometown. The pay wasn't bad, but the work was draining, and the idea of spending the next 30 years in a cubicle was enough to make me feel suffocated. I knew I needed to get out, but like most people, I was scared of taking the leap. After all, who leaves a stable job in their 20s? One day, I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through Reddit, trying to avoid doing any actual work. I stumbled across a post in the r/entrepreneur subreddit that caught my eye. It was about a guy who started his own online store selling custom t-shirts. Nothing revolutionary, but what struck me was how simple the whole thing sounded. The guy explained that he used a print-on-demand service to avoid holding inventory and ship products directly to customers. It seemed like the perfect low-risk, low-investment idea to dip my toes into the entrepreneurial waters. That night, I stayed up late researching every aspect of the business. I knew this was my way out. I didn't have much to go on in terms of savings, but I'd saved about $3,000 over the past year. It wasn't a fortune, but I figured it was enough to give this side hustle a shot. I knew I needed a niche, something that would stand out in the crowded world of online t-shirt stores. I spent hours brainstorming ideas, but nothing felt right. I wanted to do something that resonated with me personally, so I thought about the things I loved. One of my biggest hobbies was cooking. I followed every food blog and spent my weekends experimenting in the kitchen. That's when it hit me. Why not combine my love of food with my new business idea? I began sketching out designs that had witty food-related quotes, quirky illustrations of cooking utensils, and even funny puns. By the end of the week, I had a small collection of designs ready to go. I used a popular print-on-demand platform to upload the designs, set up a basic Shopify store, and launch my business, Foodie Tees. The first couple of weeks were slow, really slow. I'd check my store every morning, hoping for that first sale, but there was nothing. My website was nice enough, but it lacked the attention and marketing it needed to succeed. I had made the rookie mistake of assuming that just having a product would be enough. I quickly learned that no one was going to find my store unless I put in the effort to drive traffic. The first turning point came when I decided to spend $50 on Facebook ads. I'd heard a lot about how powerful Facebook ads could be, and I figured it was worth a shot. I targeted people who followed food blogs, cooking YouTubers, and other related pages. I spent the next few days refreshing my Facebook ads manager, praying for something to happen. Sure enough, a few days later, I made my first sale. It wasn't much, a $20 t-shirt, but I didn't care. It was proof that my idea could work. I was over the moon. The next few months were a blur. I kept testing different ad campaigns, tweaking my designs, and experimenting with what worked. Slowly, my sales grew. I started to realize that having a strong social media presence could help spread the word, so I began posting regularly on Instagram and Facebook, showcasing my designs, running giveaways, and engaging with followers. I was still working full-time, so every spare minute was spent on my business. Some nights, I'd stay up until 3 a.m. answering customer emails, updating my site, and planning new marketing strategies. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was making progress, and that was enough to keep me going. By the summer of 2016, my side hustle was doing well enough that I decided to take the plunge and quit my job. I had saved enough to cover my living expenses for a few months, and I knew I couldn't keep juggling both my full-time job and my business. Leaving the comfort of a stable paycheck was terrifying, but I knew it was the only way I'd be able to fully commit to my dream. The next year was the most challenging, yet rewarding, of my life. There were days when I felt like I was failing, sales would drop, I'd get negative reviews, and sometimes it felt like I was stuck in the grind with no progress. But then there were days when everything clicked. I launched a new design that went viral, saw a huge increase in orders, and was finally able to hire my first employee to help with customer service and fulfillment. That was a game changer. By 2018, Foodie Tees had turned into a full-fledged business. We had expanded our product line to include aprons, mugs, and even food-themed phone cases. We'd built a loyal customer base, and word of mouth was doing wonders. I even got to a point where I was able to take a small salary from the business and still reinvest in growing it. But just as things seemed to be going well, I hit a major setback. A larger company in the same niche began offering the same types of designs, but at a much lower price point. I watched in horror as my sales dropped sharply. It was like being punched in the gut. I spent days stressing over what to do. After a lot of soul-searching, I decided that the only way to stand out was to offer something they couldn't, a unique, personal touch. I began focusing more on customization. I allowed customers to upload their own designs and even offered a service where they could collaborate with my design team to create one-of-a-kind pieces. This move turned out to be a game changer. Customers loved the idea of having something that was entirely theirs. Sales began to pick up again, and by 2020, Foodie Tees was back on track. Today, I'm proud to say that Foodie Tees is a six-figure business. I have a small team of creative people who help me manage the day-to-day operations, and we're constantly coming up with new designs and products. It hasn't been easy, and there were countless times when I felt like giving up, but I'm so glad I didn't. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the road to success is never a straight line. It's filled with unexpected twists, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But if you're willing to put in the work and adapt when things aren't going as planned, the rewards are worth it. There's no greater feeling than knowing that your hard work has paid off, and that you built something from the ground up. So, if you're out there, feeling stuck in a job you hate or wondering if your side hustle could become something bigger, take it from me. You can do it. It won't be easy, but it's worth the ride. Just keep going. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.